Throughout human history, the alluring dream of changing our physical form has captivated our collective imagination. We find these stories of fluid identity woven deeply into ancient mythologies and modern superhero blockbusters alike. The thought of seamlessly slipping into another body offers an unparalleled sense of absolute freedom. Imagine a world where you could instantly sprout wings to soar above the clouds or dive deep beneath the ocean waves. It is the ultimate superpower, promising a total release from the rigid biological boundaries of our birth. Yet whenever we transition this grand fantasy from fiction to reality, we hit an absolute brick wall. That immovable wall is built from the foundational, unyielding laws of modern physics. When a person changes shape, they are fundamentally rearranging complex arrangements of matter. Every single cell in your body possesses a specific mass that cannot simply vanish into thin air. This brings us directly to the most famous equation in all of human science. Albert Einstein established that mass and energy are not two separate things, but two forms of the exact same entity. His equation dictates that a tiny amount of mass is equal to a truly staggering amount of pure energy. The c in the equation represents the speed of light, which is an incredibly massive number on its own. When you square that speed of light, the resulting multiplier becomes almost completely unfathomable. Therefore, any alteration in physical mass triggers an immediate, catastrophic exchange of energetic forces. Consider what happens when a storyteller asks a character to shrink into something much smaller. To transform from a fully grown human into a small animal requires losing a vast amount of physical matter. That excess mass cannot simply be turned off or ignored by the universe. According to the law of conservation of mass, that matter must be accounted for in full. If that mass is converted entirely into energy during the shift, it releases a literal nuclear blast. The basic act of turning into a harmless house pet would instantly vaporize your entire city block. This is the terrifying scientific tax that the universe levies on the fantasy of shapeshifting. Comic books solve this problem by inventing fictional hand-waving explanations like extra-dimensional mass storage. They claim the extra matter is shunted safely away into another realm of reality entirely. But in our real universe, we possess no such convenient magical escape hatches. We are bound entirely by the strict thermodynamic bookkeeping of our physical realm. What if we chose not to alter our mass at all, but instead simply changed our density? In that scenario, shrinking into a cat would mean you still weigh as much as an adult human. You would become an incredibly dense, ultra-heavy miniature object capable of breaking furniture instantly. Walking across a normal patch of muddy ground would cause you to sink like a dropped anvil. The sheer pressure exerted by your tiny paws would punch straight through human skin if someone tried to hold you. Therefore, keeping your mass constant while changing size creates absurd biological and structural nightmares. This leaves us trapped between two equally impossible choices of fundamental physics. Either you release enough explosive energy to destroy your surroundings, or you become a dangerously hyperdense singularity. To truly understand the sheer scale of this problem, we must perform the exact mathematical calculations. We need to find out exactly how many joules of kinetic energy are locked within a standard human frame. The results of these mathematical conversions are nothing short of absolutely terrifying. We are dealing with forces that easily rival the most destructive weapons ever devised by human hands. If anyone ever succeeded in changing their shape without managing this energy, the consequences would be absolute. What happens when we look closely at the exact numbers of a 60-kilogram human turning into a 20-kilogram puppy? To answer this question, we must step directly into the realm of cold, unyielding mathematical equations. Let us establish our baseline subject as a healthy human being weighing exactly 60 kilograms. The target form for this hypothetical transformation is a small golden retriever puppy weighing exactly 20 kilograms. Simple arithmetic reveals that 40 kilograms of physical matter must instantly vanish for this transformation to succeed. According to the law of conservation of mass, matter cannot simply cease to exist without a profound consequence. Einstein's famous equation dictates that mass and energy are merely two sides of the exact same coin. To calculate the energy released, we multiply the lost mass of 40 kilograms by the speed of light squared. The resulting number is an astronomical figure that defies easy human comprehension. We are looking at a total energy discharge of approximately 3.6 quintillion joules. To put that unfathomable number into perspective, we must compare it to the most destructive weapons created by mankind. This single innocent shape-shifting event would unleash the kinetic equivalent of nearly 900 megatons of TNT. That is roughly 18 times more powerful than the Tsar Bomba, the largest nuclear weapon ever detonated in human history. The moment the transformation begins, the local atmosphere would instantly ignite into a roaring fireball. Any unfortunate city hosting this magical event would be wiped off the map in a fraction of a second. The cute puppy would not even have a chance to take its first breath before being utterly vaporized by its own birth. This catastrophic scenario assumes that the shed mass is converted entirely into pure kinetic energy and gamma radiation. But what if our shapeshifter tries to avoid a nuclear disaster by expelling the excess mass as pure heat over time? Even if extended over 24 hours, the thermal output would still require the continuous venting of millions of watts. The human body would essentially become a melting nuclear reactor core, cooking its own internal organs from the inside out. Blood would boil instantly within the veins, turning the miraculous transformation into an agonizing biological nightmare. Let us pivot to another physical workaround. What if the excess mass is simply ejected as physical matter instead of energy? To shed 40 kilograms, the shapeshifter would have to physically slough off 2/3 of their entire bodily composition. This would mean leaving behind a massive, gruesome pile of discarded muscle tissue, bone fragments, and excess blood. The sheer logistical horror of leaving a trail of human remains every time you change form makes the power highly impractical. Furthermore, the conservation of density presents an entirely separate, equally terrifying biological crisis. If you choose to keep all 60 kilograms of your mass, but pack it tightly into the small frame of a puppy, your density skyrockets. You would look like an ordinary fluffy golden retriever, but you would weigh as much as a heavy professional concrete block. Walking on ordinary surfaces would become a massive challenge as your tiny paws exert incredible localized pressure. You would crack normal tiled floors, puncture wooden decks, and sink helplessly into soft mud or ordinary grass lawns. Worse yet, your internal biological architecture would likely collapse under the weight of its own hyperdense composition. The puppy's tiny heart would struggle immensely to pump thick, heavily pressurized blood through compressed arterial pathways. Every single breath would require massive muscular effort just to expand a chest cavity compressed by heavy density. This brings us to the profound neurological paradox inherent in shrinking the physical size of a human skull. A human brain contains roughly 86 billion neurons, packed into a volume of about 1,400 cubic centimeters. A dog's brain, by stark comparison, is significantly smaller and possesses far fewer complex neural connections. If you compress 86 billion human neurons into a puppy-sized skull, the heat generated by thought alone could prove fatal. The synapses would fire so close together that they would cause a massive, uncontrollable neurological seizure. Alternatively, if you discard the extra neurons to fit the new brain size, you lose your human consciousness entirely. You would become an ordinary puppy forever, completely forgetting your original human identity, family, and past life. The physics of standard mass reduction seem to offer absolutely nothing but immediate death or total identity erasure. But nature always finds a clever loophole, and biological adaptation might offer a much safer path forward. What if we look at how actual terrestrial creatures shed weight piece by piece to escape danger? This biological process, known as autotomy, allows organisms to discard physical mass without triggering a catastrophic energy explosion. If a human could master localized biological autotomy, they could safely shed 40 kilograms of mass over a controlled period. But this introduces an even greater, highly terrifying obstacle that every shapeshifter must eventually face. Once you're a 20-kilogram puppy, how on earth do you gather the massive energy required to turn back into a 60-kilogram human? To bypass the cataclysmic energy release of instantaneous atomic decay, a shapeshifter must look to nature for inspiration. Many reptiles utilize a biological defense mechanism known as autotomy to discard unwanted parts of their anatomy when threatened. If a 60-kilogram human could shed 40 kilograms of mass piece by piece, they might avoid a nuclear-scale explosion entirely. This biological workaround, however, requires a stomach-turning physical sacrifice that defies casual imagination. To shrink into a golden retriever puppy without releasing energy, you must literally cast off your own flesh, muscle, and bone. Imagine cleanly severing your own legs, followed by large sections of your torso, just to meet the target weight of 20 kilograms. Leaving behind 40 kilograms of discarded human remains on the floor is the grim tax of biological conservation. Even if your nervous system survived this brutal pruning process, the remaining mass must still undergo radical reorganization. The remaining 20 kilograms of matter would need to bend, fold, and morph into the shape of a healthy dog. Let us assume your consciousness endures this horrifying trial, and you successfully emerge as a small, adorable golden retriever puppy. Now you face the secondary, entirely insurmountable problem of the shape-shifting loop, returning to your human form. To become a 60-kilogram human once again, you need to suddenly acquire 40 kilograms of raw mass out of thin air. The law of conservation of mass states clearly that matter cannot be created from nothing. You cannot simply wish your missing muscles, organs, and skeletal structures back into existence. One option is to look back at the bloody pile of discarded human remains you left behind on the laboratory floor. To grow back to your original size, you would have to physically reabsorb or consume your own discarded flesh. This presents an immediate anatomical nightmare, as a 20-kilogram puppy does not possess the stomach capacity to ingest 40 kilograms of matter. Even if you attempted to absorb the tissue through your paws or skin, the cellular mechanics would be agonizingly slow. The process of fusing two entirely different types of cellular arrangements would take days, if not weeks, of continuous effort. During this prolonged period of reabsorption, you would remain a horrific, half-human, half-canine hybrid anomaly. What happens if someone cleans the room and throws away your discarded mass while you're still a puppy? If those 40 kilograms of flesh are incinerated, your original human form is permanently lost to the cosmos. You would be trapped forever in the body of a domestic pet, with no physical way to rebuild your human self. Let us pivot away from the autotomy method and look back at the pure physics alternative. If you did not use autotomy, you must instead reverse the Einsteinian energy equation to generate 40 kilograms of mass. To create 40 kilograms of flesh out of pure energy requires the exact same astronomical amount you would have released during shrinking. You need to somehow harness and absorb roughly 860 megatons of TNT equivalent energy into your tiny puppy body. This is equivalent to absorbing the blast radius of several dozen of the largest hydrogen bombs ever detonated by mankind. Where on Earth could a 20-kilogram golden retriever possibly find an energy source of that magnitude? Sucking that much electricity directly from the global power grid would instantly cause a total blackout across entire continents. The sheer electrical current flowing toward you would vaporize your canine nervous system before a single gram of mass could form. Even if you used a highly futuristic sci-fi containment suit to funnel the energy safely, the thermodynamic heat generated would be absolute. Any machine capable of channeling that much raw power would need to be the size of a small mountain range. This transforms shapeshifting from a convenient, stealthy biological superpower into a multi-trillion-dollar industrial operation. A superhero could never turn into an animal on a stealth mission while trailing a massive nuclear power station behind them. Therefore, the laws of nature create an asymmetrical trap where it is far easier to destroy your mass than it is to rebuild it. The physics of our universe are fundamentally hostile to the whimsical freedom promised by comic books and ancient myths. But what if we ignore the catastrophic physical cost entirely and look at a world where these rules were somehow mastered? Imagine the incredible utopian benefits to society if humanity could safely manipulate its own physical forms without consequence. Yet, just as we begin to dream of a world freed from physical limitations, an entirely new and far more terrifying threat emerges from the shadows. To understand the ultimate promise of this technology, we must first look past the raw, destructive physics of energy conversion. Imagine a society where the immutable laws of biology are finally bent to the absolute will of human consciousness. In this theoretical utopia, the severe physical limitations that have defined human history for millennia would dissolve instantly. Millions of individuals worldwide currently suffer from profound body dysmorphia and societal pressures regarding their physical appearance. Mastered biological shapeshifting would offer an immediate permanent cure for these deeply rooted psychological wounds. A person could reshape their height, weight, and facial structure within seconds to perfectly align with their internal self-image. The multi-billion-dollar cosmetic surgery industry would become obsolete overnight as natural cellular restructuring takes its place. People would no longer be trapped inside bodies that feel completely foreign or restrictive to their daily lives. For the transgender and gender non-conforming communities, this mastery would represent the ultimate form of physical liberation. No longer bound by lengthy medical transitions, the biological expression of gender would become as fluid as thought itself. This level of autonomy would foster an unprecedented global era of self-love, acceptance, and mental well-being. Beyond aesthetics, the medical applications of controlled cellular shapeshifting are truly staggering to contemplate. Chronic diseases that ravage organs could be solved by simply commanding the damaged tissue to reshape into healthy cells. Paralysis could be undone in an instant by actively restructuring severed neural pathways back into a cohesive network. genetic anomalies and birth defects would no longer be permanent fixtures of an individual's lifelong reality. Humanity would essentially achieve a form of biological immortality, continuously refreshing aging cells to maintain peak vitality. Society would shift its collective focus away from the struggle for physical survival and toward pure intellectual pursuit. Discrimination based on race, ethnicity, or outward appearance would lose all of its traditional systemic power. When physical traits can be changed as easily as changing clothes, racism and superficial judgments become entirely meaningless. True identity would finally be judged solely by the depth of one's character, intellect, and creative spirit. The arts would explode into a new renaissance as performers physically morph to embody different roles and abstract concepts. Dance would evolve into a breathtaking display of shifting geometry, where human bodies mimic the fluid motions of nature. Environmental adaptation would also allow humans to explore Earth's harshest terrain without heavy protective gear. Divers could modify their lungs to process oxygen directly from water, opening up the deep ocean trenches to human eyes. Space exploration would accelerate dramatically if astronauts could adapt their bodies to survive intense cosmic radiation. The massive infrastructure required to keep fragile human bodies alive in extreme conditions would no longer be necessary. We would transform from passive inhabitants of our ecosystem into active, harmonious participants within it. Food scarcity would decline sharply as individuals learn to alter their metabolic processes to require fewer resources. The ecological footprint of cities would shrink to a fraction of its current size as biological efficiency peaks. The very definition of community would expand to include a deep, shared understanding of what it means to be human. Empathy would reach an all-time high because anyone could literally spend a day walking in another person's shoes. Communication would transcend spoken words, relying instead on subtle, real-time shifts in physical form and color expression. This biological harmony would pave the way for unprecedented global peace, solving conflicts born of superficial differences. Humanity would finally master its own evolution, guiding our species into a golden age of absolute physical self-determination. It is a beautiful, flawless vision of a world completely redeemed from the tyranny of random genetic luck. But history teaches us that every grand technological leap inevitably carries a dark, predatory shadow behind it. Absolute freedom over physical identity means the absolute destruction of accountability, trust, and legal verification. If anyone can look like anyone else, the foundational concept of a secure society begins to crumble into pure chaos. The perfect utopia we have just envisioned stands on a knife's edge, entirely vulnerable to those who would abuse its power. For as we turn our gaze away from the dream of self-actualization, a terrifying new wave of perfect criminals prepares to strike from the darkness. This sudden dissolution of physical consistency weaponizes the very concept of human identity against the foundations of modern civilization. The traditional security frameworks that protect our wealth, our governance, and our private lives rely entirely on the permanent uniqueness of the human body. Once a malicious actor breaks free from the constraints of a single genetic form, every vault door and biometric lock becomes utterly obsolete. Consider the mechanics of a perfect bank robbery, executed not with firearms, but with borrowed cellular structures. An infiltrator simply walks past the guard desks by effortlessly mirroring the exact retinal pattern and fingerprint array of the institution's chief financial officer. Within minutes, billions of digital assets vanish into untraceable accounts before the real executive even finishes their morning commute. Yet the economic fallout of such crimes pales in comparison to the looming nightmare of absolute identity theft on a personal level. A predator could permanently replace a spouse, a parent, or a business partner, completely hijacking a victim's life from the inside out. The legal system would instantly collapse under the weight of an unprovable crime where physical evidence no longer points to a definitive suspect. Forensic science, which spent over a century refining DNA profiling, would find itself entirely toothless against a criminal who can modify their genetic excretion at will. When the crime scene leaves behind hair or blood that matches an innocent citizen who is miles away, justice becomes an arbitrary guessing game. Moving upward from corporate and individual domains, the weaponization of shapeshifting reaches its most terrifying peak within international espionage. A single political saboteur possessing this biological mutability could single-handedly orchestrate global warfare. By assuming the likeness of a world leader, an assassin could stand before a live broadcasting audience and declare a preemptive nuclear strike. Before the deception is uncovered through standard bureaucratic channels, automated defense systems would have already launched their retaliatory payloads. This calculated manipulation of physical appearance represents the ultimate biological evolution of the modern deepfake crisis. We have already witnessed the profound societal instability caused by artificial intelligence, synthesizing convincing video and audio recordings of public figures. Shapeshifting effectively tears that digital falsehood out of the screen and manifests it directly into our three-dimensional physical reality. When the eyes can no longer trust the physical presence of a person standing right in front of them, the shared social contract of humanity dissolves entirely. Every interaction would become poisoned by a paralyzing undercurrent of suspicion and existential dread. To combat this terrifying vulnerability, nations would inevitably resort to the most draconian surveillance measures ever conceived. Constant mass spectrometry checkpoints would have to be installed at every street corner to continuously verify the unchanging molecular weight of every passing citizen. Citizens would find themselves forced to carry continuous genetic broadcasting beacons sewn directly into their skin. In trying to defend society against the ultimate camouflage, we would strip away the remaining shreds of personal privacy and autonomy. This brings our entire scientific investigation full circle, arriving back at the immutable laws of thermodynamics that govern our universe. The sheer physics of mass energy equivalence act not just as a mechanical barrier, but perhaps as a cosmic safety mechanism designed to protect reality from chaos. If transforming from a human to an animal or an object did not require an unimaginable expenditure of energy, the universe would possess no structural integrity. The massive thermal barrier we calculated in our earlier chapters serves as a grand equalizer, ensuring that power always exacts a corresponding toll. Humanity has always been obsessed with escaping the limitations of the flesh, dreaming of myths where gods and monsters wear shapes like garments. But our modern technological ascent proves that true transformation does not occur by breaking the laws of nature from within our biology. We navigate the depths of the oceans using submarines, conquer the skies with aviation, and extend our consciousness across the globe through digital networks. We achieved all of these spectacular shape-shifting wonders of capability without ever having to dissolve our own skeleton or incinerate our surroundings. The physical permanence of our bodies is not a prison sentence, but rather the essential anchor that keeps our species grounded in reality. It forces us to build authentic relationships based on enduring presence, accountability, and real, observable truth. As we close this exhaustive scientific inquiry, we must acknowledge that the fantasy of changing our form will likely always remain confined to the pages of fiction. Einstein's equations stand as an eternal sentinel, reminding any who dream of such power of the catastrophic thermodynamic cost involved. The conflicts between our wild imaginations and the rigid boundaries of physics are officially resolved by this singular, unyielding truth. True power resides not in our ability to escape our human form, but in what we choose to build while remaining firmly within it. We can finally step away from the edge of the dystopian abyss, completely secure in the knowledge that reality remains safely unyielding. For in a universe governed by the absolute laws of mass and energy, the ultimate superpower will always be the simple, unaltered truth of who we are.